Welcome to my channel. Kingdom of Jerusalem. Following the First Crusade, 1095 to 1102 CE, Crusaders and Western settlers founded the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1099 CE. The kingdom, which had Jerusalem as its capital, was the most significant of the Latin East or Outremer, a term for the four Crusader states in the Middle East. It was relatively successful for 2 centuries as Europeans settled in a small area on the eastern Mediterranean coast and made new lives for themselves, but it was also plagued by political unrest and the prospect of attack. Foundation: the First Crusade. Following a request from the Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos, r. 1081 to 1118 CE, Pope Urban II, r. 1088 to 1099 CE, sent Western forces on their first crusade in November 1095 CE to retake Jerusalem from Muslim rule. In 1087 CE, the Seljuk Turks and their Sultanate of Rum seized possession of the Holy City from rival Muslims and portions of Asia Minor that had previously been under the jurisdiction of the Byzantine Empire. This was momentous for the West. The important cities of Nicaea and Antioch, as well as Jerusalem, were taken during a spectacularly successful campaign that would never be equaled by the following crusades. On July 15, 1099 CE, after a brief siege, Jerusalem was also taken. Most of the original army of Crusaders returned home triumphant, but some nobles and their followers stayed on to begin a new life in the Holy Land. It was to be only the opening chapter in a very long story to keep hold of the hard-won territory against various Muslim rulers over the next 2 centuries. The situation of Christians in the Middle East was not helped either by the soured relations with the Byzantine Empire, the Western leaders feeling that Alexios had not done very much to help the Crusaders. To defend the gains of the First Crusade, 4 Crusader states. Monarchy and government. The most significant of the Crusader nations was the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which ruled a confined area of coastal territory extending from Beirut in the north to Jaffa in the south. The fiefdoms of Acre, Tyre, Nablus, Sidon, and Caesarea were among those ruled by the kingdom. Cyprus was another convenient Christian base where Western ships could restock. The other Crusader powers were willing to provide military support at the King of Jerusalem's request, but they were not required to and frequently did not. The military orders, like as the Knights Templar and Knights Hospitaller, who were the best trained combat troops in the Levant and who were given particularly significant passes and castles to guard, did assist the king. Godfrey of Bouillon, who had been one of the key leaders during the siege of Jerusalem in the First Crusade, was made the first king of Jerusalem and given command of a small garrison in the city, around 300 knights and 2,000 infantry. The Norman Arnulf of Chox was made patriarch or bishop of Jerusalem. Godfrey might be king, which made him head of the high court and commander-in-chief of the army, but he and his successors would constantly have to wrangle with the nobles. There would follow 2 centuries of complex intermarriages of noble families, regents on the throne, usurpers, 4 brief civil wars, and endless disputes over the succession, not very much different from any other European medieval state, then. Still, the King of Jerusalem remained the most prestigious position in the Latin East, and if he, and in one instance she, were a reasonably capable ruler and did not suffer any military disasters, the monarch could expect to rule largely unchallenged. Population and integration. Although the majority were from France, Normandy, Lorraine, and Languedoc, and Flanders, the Crusaders sprang from all around Europe. They were not just aristocrats and knights, they were also less noble tradespeople like blacksmiths, builders, bakers, and butchers. The Franks were the collective name for the Western settlers in the area. They resided in well-established towns and cities, and several new settlements arose, particularly in areas where land was provided to settlers as an inducement to stay. Housing, churches, monasteries, convents, and cemeteries were constructed in this area. When the kingdom was founded, the capital city had a population of about 20,000. By the late 12th century CE, that number had increased to over 30,000. The new church of the capital was arguably the most significant and long-lasting construction undertaking in the Holy Sepulchre. Initially, as the kingdom established itself, there were massacres of local populations, but the Westerners soon realized that to hold on to the gains they needed the support of the extraordinarily diverse locals. Consequently, there grew a tolerance of non-Christian religions, albeit with some restrictions and with an inferior legal status to Catholic Christians. Jews and Muslims could visit Jerusalem but not reside there, for example, but there were never any anti-Jewish pogroms in the Latin East as there were in contemporary Europe. There were many Eastern Christians, especially Armenians, in the kingdom, but even more Muslims, perhaps outnumbering the Christian population. The locals had been living in a feudal system under the Seljuks, and the same system continued under the Crusader settlers who, along with their families, would have numbered no more than a few thousand. La langue des, then spoken in northern France and by the Normans, was the official tongue of the kingdom because the majority of Crusaders originated from France. There was relatively little cultural blending between groups. Rather, contact was restricted to legal, economic, and administrative matters because of the linguistic, religious, and boundaries between ruler and ruled. If there was any cultural blending, it was more noticeable on the Franks' side with their adoption of regional attire, diet, and cleanliness customs better suited to the Middle Eastern environment, as well as their support of regional architects and artists. Economy. The coastal plains of the Kingdom of Jerusalem were particularly fertile and a great source of wealth, helped in their productivity by still-in-use Roman aqueducts and irrigation channels and new ones built by the Franks. Sugarcane was a big earner. Indeed, most sugar consumed in Europe in the 12th–13th century CE came from the Crusader states. Other crops included wheat, maize, millet, barley, fruit, olive oil, wine, and cotton. Fabrics were exported, especially silk and linen. Trade passing from east to west, spices, dyes, wood, ivory, metals, and manufactured goods, was a lucrative source of revenue as duties were imposed, 4 to 25% of the goods' value or volume. Acre, for example, had replaced Alexandria as the most important trading port in the eastern Mediterranean and welcomed traders from Byzantium, North Africa, and Arabia. Although the history of the Kingdom of Jerusalem is a complex tale of religious fervor, military conquest, and cultural exchange, and it continues to be a subject of fascination for historians and enthusiasts interested in the medieval Crusades.